If you grew up in the 70s or 80s, you'll never forget the first time you dropped a bomb on me hit the speakers. It was the soundtrack of parties, roller rinks, and pure joy, all thanks to the Gap Band. But behind the hits, behind the dance floors they kept alive, lies a story most fans never knew. A story of fame, family, heartbreak, and tragedy. Did you know that while their music still plays at parties around the world, the members themselves faced devastating struggles? From drug battles and broken bonds to heartbreaking losses, the Gap Band's rise and fall is as powerful as their music. So what really happened to Charlie, Ronnie, and Robert Wilson? Why did their incredible success fade away? And most importantly, where are the members now in 2025? Stay tuned, because today we're uncovering the Gap Band, 1970s members then and now, and the tragic story behind the music you'll never hear the same way again. The story of the Gap Band began in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1967. At its heart were the three Wilson brothers, Charlie, Ronnie, and Robert. But over time, other local musicians would drift in and out of the lineup. Their original name, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine Band, was meant as a playful nod to three streets in Tulsa's historic black neighborhood. What started as a joke eventually stuck, and the name was soon shortened to something far more memorable: the Gap Band. Their first big break came in 1974, when the group landed the role of backing band for fellow Oklahoman Leon Russell on his album Stop All That Jazz. It was a crucial step, putting their sound on a bigger stage. At the time, the group leaned heavily into the funk style that dominated the early 1970s. But despite their energy and ambition, their first two albums, Magician's Holiday, 1974, recorded at Leon Russell's legendary Church studio, and the Gap Band, 1977, not to be confused with their later self-titled release in 1979, failed to chart or produce any hits. Still, the Wilson brothers were determined. Their fortunes changed when they were introduced to Los Angeles producer Lonnie Simmons. Impressed by their talent, Simmons signed them to his production company, Total Experience Productions, named after his thriving Crenshaw Boulevard nightclub. With Simmons' guidance and the security of a new record deal with Mercury Records, the Gap Band was finally on the path that would lead them to funk stardom. With producer Lonnie Simmons guiding them, the Gap Band finally struck gold, literally and figuratively. Their first album under his direction, the Gap Band, 1979, delivered their breakthrough hits. I'm in Love found its way onto the charts, while Shake soared into the R&B top 10, giving the Wilson brothers their first real taste of mainstream success. Later that same year, they doubled down with the Gap Band 2. The standout track was I Don't Believe You Want to Get Up and Dance, Oops, a funky, playful anthem that reached number 4 on the Billboard R&B chart, even if it missed the Hot 100. The album went gold, proving the band had found their groove. Their sound had shifted closer to the Parliament Funkadelic style, with heavy use of synthesizers, thumping bass lines, and even comedic spoken monologues. Another single, Steppin' Out, also cracked the R&B top 10. Around this time, Charlie Wilson lent his voice to Stevie Wonder's I Ain't Gonna Stand For It on the Hotter Than July album, showing just how in-demand his soulful vocals had become. By 1980, the Gap Band exploded into the mainstream with the Gap Band 3. The record topped the R&B charts and climbed to number 16 on the Billboard 200. It produced a perfect balance of slow-burning ballads and dance floor anthems. Yearning for Your Love hit number 5 on the R&B chart, while Burn Rubber, Why You Wanna Hurt Me, raced all the way to number 1. Humpin' kept the party going, solidifying the band's reputation as funk heavyweights. They repeated this winning formula in 1982 with Gap Band 4, their first release under Simmons' new label, Total Experience Records. The album went to number 1 on the R&B charts, powered by 3 massive singles, Early in the Morning, You Dropped a Bomb on Me, and Outstanding. Each track became a classic, and the group's live shows were further energized by the addition of former Brides of Funkenstein singer Dawn Silva on tour. In 1983, the band released Gap Band 5 Jammin'. Although it went gold, it didn't quite reach the heights of their earlier records. Still, it produced hits like Party Train and Jam the Mother. The album closed with a moving cover of Donny Hathaway's Someday We'll All Be Free, featuring Stevie Wonder on guest vocals, a reminder of the band's deep roots in soul as well as funk. By 1985, the Gap Band was back at the top of the R&B charts with Gap Band 6. Though it sold fewer copies and fell short of gold status, the record produced strong singles, including Beep a Freak, number 2 R&B, I Found My Baby, and Disrespect. That same year, Charlie Wilson teamed up with Shirley Murdoch to provide background vocals for Zapp and Rogers' hit Computer Love, yet another moment that cemented his reputation as one of funk's most distinctive voices. During the 1990s, the Gap Band entered the new decade with determination, releasing 3 studio albums and 2 live albums. But the magic of their earlier years was gone. None of these projects made an impact on the charts, and by then, their popularity had faded. The era of big hits was behind them. Yet even as their commercial momentum slowed, the Wilson brothers carried with them a deeper mission, remembering where they came from. Long before funk fame, their hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma, carried a history few Americans knew about: the thriving black community once known as Greenwood, or Black Wall Street. In the early 20th century, Greenwood stood as a symbol of black success and independence. Families owned businesses, banks, schools, hotels, and even hospitals, all built despite Oklahoma's harsh segregation laws. But on May 31, 1921, white mobs stormed the neighborhood in one of the worst racial attacks in American history. They set fire to homes and businesses, killed residents, and reduced a thriving community to ashes. For decades, the tragedy was hidden. Schools didn't teach it, newspapers ignored it, and many survivors were silenced. Charlie Wilson, the band's frontman, often spoke about this painful legacy while touring in the 1980s and 1990s. He wanted to make sure audiences across the country understood what had happened in his hometown. He remembered how shocked people were when they heard the story. Most had never even known the massacre took place. As Charlie explained, the truth had been buried for far too long. In later years, TV shows like Watchmen and Lovecraft Country, along with documentaries and books, brought the Tulsa Race Massacre back into public conversation. But for the Gap Band, the reminder was always present, even in their name, which stood for Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, the streets at the heart of Black Wall Street. One of their most famous hits, You Dropped a Bomb on Me, even became linked in people's minds to the tragedy. Many believed the song was a coded reference to the bombs dropped on Greenwood during the 1921 attack. Charlie Wilson, however, made it clear that the track was simply about love and heartbreak. Still, he welcomed the connection, saying that if the song helped people discover the truth about the massacre, then it was serving a greater purpose. As Charlie once explained, You Dropped a Bomb on Me wasn't written about the 1921 race riot, but the song is everywhere now, even in elevators. If it brings attention back to what happened in Tulsa, then that's a good thing. The Gap Band officially retired in 2010, but their music remains beloved around the world. More than just funk pioneers, they left behind a legacy that went deeper than the dance floor. Charlie Wilson has never stopped reminding people that the story of Black Wall Street must be told. As he put it best, better late than never. Even if it took years for people to start talking about it, the truth is finally being shared. The heirs of the royalties. Lawsuit against BMG. Years after the Gap Band left their mark on funk history, their music found new life in one of the biggest pop hits of the 21st century, Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars' Uptown Funk. The track, released in 2014, became a cultural phenomenon, racking up billions of streams and views worldwide. But behind its success came a battle over credit and royalties. In 2015, similarities between Uptown Funk and the Gap Band's 1979 classic Oops Upside Your Head were impossible to ignore. As a result, Ronnie and Robert Wilson, along with producers Rudolph Taylor and Lonnie Simmons, were added as co-writers on the song. Each Wilson brother was awarded 3.4% of the copyright, a small but significant share considering the song's global success. However, the heirs of Ronnie and Robert Wilson later claimed they never received the royalties they were promised. In a lawsuit filed in federal court in Manhattan, they accused BMG Rights Management of failing to honor the 2015 agreement, which had been made in collaboration with BMG, Universal Music, and Sony ATV. The heirs argued that BMG was contractually obligated to pay them, but had instead withheld money from their share of the song's earnings. BMG, for its part, denied wrongdoing. The company stated it had never agreed to the settlement terms alleged in the lawsuit and insisted the case had no basis. When the heirs eventually withdrew their claims, the lawsuit was dismissed without prejudice, meaning it could potentially be refiled in the future. For now, however, BMG declared victory, emphasizing its commitment to treating artists fairly and continuing to honor the Gap Band's legacy. Notably, Charlie Wilson, the third Wilson brother and the band's iconic frontman, was not involved in the lawsuit. Meanwhile, Uptown Funk remains one of the most valuable pop songs of the century. It has been streamed over 1.6 billion times on Spotify, and its music video is among the most viewed videos on YouTube. In 2020, Mark Ronson even sold 70% of his music catalog, including his royalties from Uptown Funk, to Hypnosis Songs Fund, underscoring the track's enduring worth. Mark Ronson has maintained in interviews that the similarities to Oops Upside Your Head were unintentional, stressing that no deliberate copying took place. Struggles with record labels and their legacy. Behind the fame and the hit records, the Gap Band fought constant battles with record labels and management, struggles that would shape not only their music, but also their relationships with one another. In the early years, labels like Total Experience and Capitol Records gave the group the support they needed to rise to stardom. They funded albums, tours, and promotion, pushing the Gap Band into the spotlight. But as time went on, disagreements began to surface. The Wilson brothers wanted more control over their sound and their careers, while the labels focused on profit. Contracts often left the band feeling trapped, forced to follow rules that stifled their creativity. Management was another source of conflict. Managers were supposed to guide and protect the band, but sometimes decisions were made that didn't benefit the musicians at all. Money disputes and clashing visions led to stress and even heated fights within the group. When trust broke down, unity suffered. And when a band isn't united, creating timeless music becomes nearly impossible. Musically, the Gap Band also faced pressure to change. In the beginning, their style was pure funk, raw, energetic, and electrifying, the very reason fans fell in love with them. But as record labels pushed for broader commercial success, their sound became more polished, more mainstream. While this shift helped them reach bigger audiences, some longtime fans felt betrayed, believing the group had strayed too far from its funk roots. That divide created tension between their original base and the new direction labels demanded. Even their name and legacy became a point of struggle. Over time, different versions of the Gap Band began to appear, sometimes led by former members or even unrelated musicians. Legal battles erupted over who had the right to use the name, leaving fans confused about whether they were seeing the real band or an imitation. Instead of being remembered as one united group, the Gap Band's legacy risked becoming fragmented, caught between music industry politics, personal battles, and the weight of their own success. Turned down a lucrative deal. The history of the Gap Band took an interesting turn one night in the 1980s. when they found themselves on tour alongside a new act that was shaking up the music world, Run DMC. At the time, rap was still considered a passing fad by many in the industry, but Charlie Wilson wasn't one of them. He saw its energy, its future, and its power. One evening, Charlie, his manager, and another member of the band went to speak with Run DMC in their hotel room. They brought an unusual request from the tour's promoter. Run DMC would have to close the shows for the rest of the tour, but without being paid as headliners. They would still be treated like an opening act, even though they were the last to perform. Normally, the headliner always closed the show, so it was a bold demand. Charlie Wilson agreed with the promoter at the time, though he delivered the message in a light-hearted, almost humorous way, not even facing the group directly as he spoke. While many artists of that era dismissed rap as a trend that wouldn't last, Charlie thought differently. He respected Run DMC, enjoyed performing with them, and believed they were destined for greatness. That respect extended beyond the stage. There was even an opportunity for the Gap Band to work with Russell Simmons, the mastermind behind Run DMC. Simmons wanted to sign the Wilson brothers, convinced they could bridge funk, rock, and rap into something groundbreaking. But not everyone of the group agreed. Charlie's brother was skeptical, unsure that Simmons was the right fit, and ultimately, they turned the offer down. Looking back years later, Charlie admitted that passing on Simmons may have cost them the chance to create something truly special. Still, Charlie had nothing but admiration for Run DMC and what they achieved. When asked about those years, he often laughs, saying the memories blur together. It was a different time with so much happening all at once. But behind the tours and the business decisions, Charlie was fighting personal battles. He had fallen deep into drug addiction, and it nearly consumed his life. At one point, he weighed just 115 pounds. The woman who would later become his wife looked at him with tears in her eyes and told him plainly, "You're dying." Charlie resisted at first, but she was right. She had been sober for 3 years and urged him to find the same path. Through her support, grace, and his own determination, Charlie eventually found recovery. Charlie Wilson, the star. There was a time in the early 1970s when Charlie Wilson was offered a life-changing opportunity, a solo deal worth $1 million. The people behind the offer had big plans for him. They envisioned Charlie as the Black Elton John, with top songwriters ready to craft hits and an entire campaign designed to turn him into a solo superstar. But Charlie was just 21 years old, and to him, the Gap Band wasn't just a group, it was family. He couldn't imagine walking away from his brothers. In fact, he was so offended by the offer that he cursed at the people making it, feeling like they were trying to break up his family. Looking back, Charlie knows it was an enormous opportunity, but he doesn't regret turning it down. He believed staying with his brothers was the right choice. Ironically, Charlie later admitted that if he had taken the money, he probably wouldn't have survived. At the time, he was caught in a dangerous lifestyle: drugs, late nights, and chaos. He remembers sleeping under parked cars, barely weighing 115 pounds, and spiraling out of control. Fame and fortune, he believes, would have consumed him, just as it did Andy Gibb of the Bee Gees. Charlie now says that God had a plan for him, that the struggles, setbacks, and circles he walked in were part of the journey meant to bring him to where he is today. Not everyone saw it that way. His older brother once told him, "Better you than me. If it had been me, I would have taken the deal a long time ago." At the time, $1 million was a staggering amount, especially for a young man from Tulsa. But Charlie stayed loyal to the Gap Band. The sad truth, however, is that despite all the band's success, Charlie himself never made real money from it, not even from their live shows. When asked who was actually getting paid, Charlie answered bluntly, "My brother." It was a painful reality. The music industry has always been tough, and like many artists of their era, the Gap Band were taken advantage of. For Charlie, the betrayal cut even deeper because it came from family. Years later, Charlie admitted that he didn't always know the truth about what was happening behind the scenes. As the younger brother, he trusted Ronnie and followed his lead. If his brother said, "Don't do this, don't do that," he listened. Only later did he realize that money and decisions weren't always handled fairly. It hurt, but he chose to forgive. Before one of his brothers passed away, Charlie sat by his side, asked him the hard questions, and told him, "I'm not mad at you." Clearing the air mattered more to him than holding on to anger. Charlie also became outspoken about the realities of award shows. Despite attending the Grammys 13 times, he never put much stock in them. He pointed out that R&B and soul artists rarely get the spotlight. Most of their awards are handed out before the cameras roll. "Unless you're a rapper, you're not going to get much of this," he said, noting how the industry often overlooked artists like him. For Charlie, awards didn't define his worth. His music, his hits, and his survival were his true rewards. In 2005, the Gap Band received one of their greatest honors when they were named BMI Icons at the 57th Annual BMI Urban Awards. It was recognition of their profound influence on modern music. Their hit "Outstanding" became one of the most sampled songs in history, used by over 150 artists. Even beyond R&B and hip-hop, their sound inspired legends. Nirvana's drummer, Dave Grohl, once revealed that the beat for "Smells Like Teen Spirit" was influenced by the Gap Band's rhythms. Their legacy stretched far beyond funk, leaving fingerprints on rock, rap, and pop alike. Though the Gap Band is no longer active, their influence remains everywhere, from Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube to Mary J. Blige, Nas, and even international acts. Charlie Wilson, the star who once turned down $1 million offer to stay with his family, has lived through betrayal, addiction, and heartbreak. But he survived, and in doing so, he carried not just the Gap Band's legacy, but his own into the future. Proof that his journey was never about awards or money, but about music, survival, and faith. Where are the Gap Band's members now? Robert Wilson. Robert Wilson, the youngest of the Wilson brothers and the band's bass player, was often called the godfather of the bass guitar. His deep, funky grooves powered classics like "Outstanding" and "Burn Rubber." Sadly, Robert's story ended too soon. He passed away from a heart attack in 2010 at just 53 years old. Known for his bold stage presence and unmatched bass lines, Robert left behind a wife, Brenda, and 2 daughters, Robin and LaToya. Though gone, his legacy continues every time the Gap Band's music shakes a dance floor. Ronnie Wilson. Ronnie Wilson, the oldest of the 3 brothers, was the band's keyboardist, trumpeter, and the architect behind much of their sound. He often took the role of leader, guiding the group from their early days in Tulsa to their biggest commercial heights in the 1980s. After decades in music, Ronnie suffered a stroke and passed away in 2021 at the age of 73. He spent his later years in Tulsa, remaining connected to his roots. Fans and fellow musicians remember him as the steady hand that kept the group together and the creative force who helped shape their unforgettable funk style. Oliver Scott. Oliver Scott joined the Gap Band in the late 1970s as a keyboardist, arranger, and composer. He co-wrote the hit "Yearning for Your Love," one of the band's most enduring ballads. After leaving the group, Scott found success in gospel music, releasing his own albums and dedicating himself to Christian ministry. Today, he continues to balance music and faith, carrying forward a quieter but meaningful career that still honors his time with the Gap Band. Raymond Calhoun. Raymond Calhoun, best known as the drummer who penned the hit "Outstanding," remains active in the music world. After his time with the Gap Band, he became the longtime drummer for Patti LaBelle, touring the world and lending his talents to one of soul's most celebrated voices. Based in Washington, D.C., Calhoun also mentors younger musicians, proving that the beat he set with the Gap Band still echoes in today's generation of artists. Billy Young. Billy Young played trumpet with the Gap Band during their peak years, contributing to the brassy, horn-driven sound that became one of their trademarks. After his tenure with the group, he continued working as a session musician and later stepped away from the spotlight, living a more private life. Though he no longer tours, his sound remains immortalized in the grooves of the band's biggest hits. The Gap Band's legacy is a mix of triumph, tragedy, and timeless music that still inspires new generations. From Robert and Ronnie's unforgettable contributions to the ongoing influence of members like Oliver Scott and Raymond Calhoun, their impact reaches far beyond the funk era. But what do you think? Does the Gap Band get the respect they truly deserve for shaping the sound of R&B and funk? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories like this.